She came home with a pink box of donuts. That was the first alarm bell, tiny, stupid, but sharp. She hates donuts. Claims they make her nauseous. She's the type to preach about chia seeds and oat milk and things I can't even pronounce. But there she was, placing the box on the counter like she was setting a trap. Thought the kids might like a treat, she said, not looking at me. I stared at the box. For donuts. We have 2 kids. For donuts. Not 3, not 5, 4. I didn't say a word, just nodded. But my brain didn't let it go. Later, while she was upstairs doing whatever she does for 45 minutes after every phone call she claims is with her team, I opened the trash can in the garage. Buried under a plastic bag of onion skins and an empty almond milk carton was another pink box, empty. That made 8 donuts in total. 8. Someone had already shared the first 4. I didn't ask. Not yet. But I wrote it down in my head, filed it next to other recent oddities. The second gym bag she stuffed in the trunk on Tuesday, her sudden obsession with red lipstick, and the way she started humming while cooking dinner, as if something inside her was giggling that I couldn't hear. She hadn't hummed in years. Not since her father died. On Thursday, I followed her. She said she was meeting her friend Danielle for a yoga class. I left work early, sat in my car across from the fitness studio she named, and waited. Watched. The clock ticked for 52 minutes. No sign of her. But at 6:17 p.m., a black Mazda pulled into a parking lot 2 blocks down. She got out, wearing that same cherry lipstick, and walked into an old building with a faded Creative Arts Center sign. No yoga mat, no Danielle, and definitely no sweatpants. I drove home that night with a strange sensation crawling up my throat. Not rage, not sorrow. Something between nausea and electricity. I told myself I was wrong, that there could be 100 explanations. I even Googled if yoga could be done without a mat. That's how badly I didn't want this to be what it looked like. But I couldn't stop myself the next morning. I said casually over breakfast, "Hey, how was the class last night?" She blinked too quickly. "Oh, intense," she said. Danielle almost fainted. "We did this new inversion pose." I looked right at her, tried to read if she was pretending or if she'd convinced herself it was true. She took a sip of coffee and avoided my eyes. "Cool," I said. "Maybe next time I'll join." She froze. Just for a second. Then smiled, wide and fake. "You? Please. You can't even touch your toes." "Maybe I'll learn," I said, staring straight at her. "Or maybe I'll find my own instructor." There was a flicker. Not fear. Not guilt. Just irritation. As if I was inconvenient. And that moment, it was everything. It wasn't a broken heart or a desperate cry. It was the realization that something inside her had shifted, and not recently. Whatever this was, it had been happening for a while. And now it was unraveling fast. But I didn't plan to confront her yet. No, not yet. Because something in me whispered, let her build the lie higher. The fall will be louder that way. On Saturday, she told me she was going to a wellness retreat. An overnight thing. Some new thing her company was pushing for team bonding. She packed a duffel bag and her favorite water bottle, slipped on her running shoes, and kissed the kids before heading out around 10 a.m. But she didn't kiss me. Not even a distracted peck on the cheek. Just a vague, "Don't wait up, they've got us doing morning meditations and lights out by 10. Then she was gone. The front door closed like a period at the end of a sentence I hadn't written. She didn't know I'd already checked her wellness retreat flyer because I asked her assistant, whom I met once at their office Christmas party. That assistant looked confused when I asked about it. "Wellness retreat," she said. She didn't mention anything like that to me. That was enough. I waited 3 hours. Gave her time to settle in wherever she really was. Then I drove out. I had a tracker app installed on her car's Bluetooth months ago. She never noticed. It pinged her at a place 2 towns over, a little bed and breakfast called the Fern Hollow Inn. I parked down the street and watched from a distance. I didn't know what I expected. A confrontation? A guy carrying her bags? Maybe her laughing in a robe by the fireplace? Nope. It was worse. At 4:12 p.m., I saw her come out the front door in a sweater I'd never seen before. She was smiling like she hadn't smiled in years. That painful kind of smile that digs under your skin because you know it wasn't meant for you. A man followed her. Mid-30s, khakis, and expensive shoes. Too casual for a business thing, too polished to be just some random fling. They walked to the car together, He opened the passenger door for her. And then she kissed him. It wasn't a heated, reckless kind of kiss. It was slow, comfortable, like they'd done it 100 times before. Like it was normal. I didn't get out of the car. I didn't scream or charge or take photos. I sat there, my fingers twitching on the steering wheel, my vision narrowing until all I could see was the spot where she'd been standing. Something inside me cracked, not in a cinematic, dramatic way. No tears. No shouting. Just a deep, low shudder like a building groaning before collapse. I didn't follow them. I let them go. I drove back to her house. Sat in the driveway for an hour while my kids played inside, unaware. The sky was turning orange. Mia ran past the window holding a paper crown she made in school. Eli followed with a toy sword. They looked so proud of their imaginary kingdom. That's when the real clarity hit. She was playing her own game in secret, but this was my kingdom. My house. My kids. My story. And if she thought she could twist it into something else, she was going to learn just how wrong she was. I didn't plan a breakdown. I planned a reckoning. And I wasn't alone. Because when Mia handed me her paper crown later that night and said, "You're the king, Daddy," I knew exactly how this story would end. She wouldn't see it coming. By Sunday morning, the air in the house felt too quiet. Like it was holding its breath, waiting for a scream. I poured cereal for the kids, cut strawberries the way she always used to, and kept glancing at the clock. She hadn't texted. No updates, no check-ins. Nothing. Not even a fake "love you" out of obligation. She was still with him. Somewhere. But I wasn't sitting still anymore. I spent the day collecting pieces, old receipts she forgot to hide, calendar events that suddenly made more sense, and a note she once scribbled in a book and claimed was just a quote. It wasn't. It was a message. A personal one. Tucked into the spine of a novel I never saw her read. It said, "Even when I'm pretending, I still miss you. That wasn't meant for me." She got home at 7:43 p.m. smelling like lavender and hotel linen. The kids ran to her. She did that fake laugh again, the one that sounded slightly too bright, slightly too forced, and she hugged them like she hadn't just kissed another man 24 hours earlier. I stood in the kitchen, arms crossed. She didn't even look at me. She just dropped her bag by the stairs like nothing happened. I followed her. She went into our bedroom, tossed her sweater onto the bed. I stepped in behind her and closed the door. "You didn't bring back anything from the wellness retreat?" I asked. She turned around, half a smirk on her lips. "It wasn't that kind of retreat." "Why? No photos? No brochure? Nothing to show the kids?" She blinked, slow. "We weren't allowed to take photos. It was meant to be unplugged." I tilted my head. "Unplugged? Huh? That's what you're going with? What's your problem, Mark?" Her voice snapped like a twig under pressure. "I go away one night to recharge and now I need to bring souvenirs?" I stepped closer. Not threatening. Not loud. Calm. Which scared her more. "You were at Fern Hollow Inn. Room 14. You kissed him before you got in his car." Her face didn't change at first. Just a slight drop in the chin. Then came the shift, like she was cycling through emotions, trying to pick which mask to wear. Shock? No. Regret? Definitely not. She landed on annoyance. "You followed me? You lied to me." She rolled her eyes. "So what, you're playing detective now? Stalking me like some jealous freak? I'm your husband." "Were," she hissed, stepping past me like the conversation bored her. "God, Mark. You're so predictable. The minute something doesn't go your way, you go full control freak. This is exactly why I needed a break. From your family? From you." She turned, arms crossed now, like she was the one who'd been wronged. That look, the pure, audacious arrogance of it, lit a fuse in me I didn't know I had. But I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I didn't even flinch. Instead, I smiled, because I saw it now. She wasn't just cheating. She was rewriting the story, trying to flip the villain and the victim. But she forgot something. The kids weren't stupid. They'd seen her slipping away, too. And I wasn't some clueless husband anymore. I had allies, and I had a plan. She just didn't know she was already in it. That night, I didn't sleep. She did, like a rock. No shame. No second thoughts. She curled up on her side of the bed, still facing away from me. like I was just a noise in the background she'd gotten used to ignoring. But while she slept, I started moving chess pieces. First, the finances. I logged into our shared bank accounts, checking for anything I hadn't noticed before. Transfers, weird charges, anything that smelled like secrecy. And there it was, weekly cash withdrawals. Always on Fridays. Always under $300, just low enough to dodge suspicion. Except she forgot I handled the bills. I knew our spending patterns like I knew her laugh before it turned fake. Second, the phone. I'd bought her that phone. I knew the cloud login. She never changed her password, thought she was clever by using our daughter's middle name with a few numbers. I didn't need to go into her messages yet. I went into her location history. And the pattern hit me like a punch. Every other Friday, for the last 3 months, she'd been spending the same 3-hour window in that town. The one with the inn. The one she swore she'd never even been to before. Third, the kids. This is where it gets strange. Monday morning, before school, Mia pulled me aside. She's 6, quiet, always watching. She clutched a drawing in her hands and held it up to me. Crayon lines, messy but clear. A woman with long brown hair holding hands with 2 men, one with a blue tie, one with a baseball cap. Who's this? I asked, careful. She whispered, that's Mommy. That's you. That's the other guy. My stomach dropped. I knelt beside her. What other guy, baby? She looked down. The one who picks her up sometimes when you're not home. He has a loud car. And he calls her Red. I nodded, heart pounding. Did Mommy tell you not to say anything? Mia nodded back, small and solemn. That was it. That was all I needed. The affair wasn't just secret. It was crawling into my kid's world. She had brought him here, or at least close enough for our daughter to remember his face. My house was no longer just poisoned, it was infested. But I wasn't the type to break down in front of my children. So I hugged her, told her she was smart and strong and brave. Then I made 2 phone calls. One to a lawyer. And one to someone else. My brother, David. He's not the kind of man who asks questions. He's the kind who listens, then moves. And when I told him, I need your help with something important. For the kids. He didn't hesitate. What's the plan? He asked. It's time she sees what betrayal really feels like. Because here's what I realized. She thought she'd gotten ahead. That I was still 2 steps behind. Scrambling for answers. But I wasn't playing her game. I was building a new one. And she was already deep inside ITWBY Wednesday. The trap was already laced. Quiet, deliberate, with no fingerprints. I wasn't looking to explode, I wanted precision. Because nothing terrifies a liar more than being dismantled slowly, piece by piece, while everyone else watches. That morning, she left the house wearing heels and a silk blouse she hadn't worn in months. Said she had a pitch meeting downtown. I nodded, told her good luck, even kissed her cheek. It made her flinch. That was satisfying. While she drove off in her car, one I had now linked to a live GPS feed, I called the school. Told them to expect me early for pickup. I told Eli and Mia we were going to get ice cream and spend the night at Uncle David's. No questions asked. The moment they were in the car, the world felt clearer. Like I'd snatched them off the tracks a second before the train barreled through. At David's place, I sat them down gently and said, we're going to stay here a little while, okay? Just until we sort something out. They both nodded. Mia said, because Mommy's being weird again? I smiled without smiling. Something like that. Meanwhile, David was already at work. He'd pulled favors, made a few discreet calls. He knew a guy in security tech who could pull phone records without leaving a trace. Not texts, that would have been too risky, but timestamps, call durations, geolocation tags. And the records painted the picture. The same number kept popping up. Multiple times a week, always after 9 p.m. And the locations matched, every single one aligned with where she told me she wasn't. It was a burner, obviously, but the man behind it? That part was the real twist. He wasn't random. I recognized the name. Brian Carlisle. He worked with her 6 years ago. He was married back then, 2 kids, nice car, Sunday barbecues. But I remembered something she told me once, drunk on red wine in the backyard under fairy lights. Brian's one of those guys who gets whatever he wants. You could tell, even back then. So that's who it was. The smooth talker with soft hands and a resume full of charm. The guy she always said was a little too cocky. And now she was driving an hour twice a week to melt under his grin. That night, she came home to an empty house. No car in the driveway. No toys scattered across the floor. No shoes by the door. Just silence and a single envelope sitting on the kitchen counter. Inside were 4 things: a copy of the call log, printed and highlighted. A photo of her and Brian kissing by the car, taken with a long lens. A child's drawing. The one Mia made. And a note, handwritten by me, betrayed and broken. I stood up, not alone, but with my children. Together, we crafted a plan for revenge that would change everything. Now the question is, will you see it coming, or will the consequences hit you too late? At 11:26 p.m., my phone buzzed. Her name on the screen. I let it ring. At 11:28 p.m., she called again. Then texted, "Where are the kids? What the hell is this? You're insane. Answer me. Mark, are you really doing this?" I didn't respond. She didn't deserve words. She needed silence. The kind that echoes. And the next day? That's when it all started unraveling for her. She showed up at David's place the next morning, unannounced, hammering the door like she owned the world. I was sitting at the kitchen table with Eli and Mia eating pancakes. Calm, focused, ready? David opened the door but didn't invite her in. "Where are my kids?" she demanded, eyes wild, voice trembling, but not from guilt. From loss of control. I stepped forward, behind David. "They're having breakfast. Something you used to do with them. Remember?" She tried to push past him. "Move. I want to see them." David didn't budge. "You'll speak to their father first." She glared at me. "Mark, what the hell are you doing? Are you trying to traumatize them? You disappear with them? That's abduction." I held up my hand. "Don't," I said low and clear. "Don't you dare use words like that. You left them long before I did." "I never left them. She hesitated, then shifted into her next mask. "We're going through something, okay? People make mistakes." I was overwhelmed. I didn't handle things the right way. But this is cruel. That's when Mia peeked from the hallway, her little voice cracking through the tension. "Are you still lying, Mommy?" And that stopped her cold. She turned, tried to smile, but the child she used to read bedtime stories to didn't return the warmth. Mia just stared, eyes wide with confusion and pain. That moment shattered her confidence. Not my words, not the evidence. The quiet rejection from her own daughter that broke her mask. She knelt. "Baby, Mommy just made some adult choices. Okay? But I love you. That hasn't changed." Eli appeared behind Mia now. He looked older somehow, like the last 24 hours aged him. "So why were you kissing another man?" Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. Nothing came out. I stepped in. "That's enough." I walked the kids back into the living room and told David to keep the door shut. Then I came back out to face her, alone. We stood in the hallway, inches apart. "You've been living in a fantasy," I said. "Sneaking around, pretending the consequences wouldn't catch you. You used your family as a shield and then walked away from them like we were part of the mess you outgrew. And now you want to cry foul because I took the one thing you never expected to lose, your image." Her eyes filled, but no tears fell. She wasn't crying from heartbreak. She was crumbling from exposure. "You think people won't find out what you've done?" she whispered. "You're going to humiliate all of us." I leaned in. "No, you are. You did this. You built the house of glass and threw the first rock." Then I handed her the custody petition. I had filed it that morning, with everything attached. Documentation, witness statements, emotional neglect reports. She was stunned. Not because I filed, but because she hadn't seen it coming. She thought she'd hold the cards forever. Thought I'd crawl, beg, apologize for not being enough. Instead, I was holding the entire deck. And as she stood there frozen, paper in hand, David's phone buzzed. A call from someone she didn't expect. Her lover's wife. David answered and handed her the phone. She went pale. The voice on the other end? Calm, measured, ruthless. "You've been sleeping with my husband." I hope it was worth everything you're about to lose. Her fingers trembled. Her jaw locked. Game over? Not yet. This was just the next level. And she was playing blind. She didn't leave right away. She just stood there holding the phone like it had poisoned her hand. The other woman had already hung up, left her with silence and consequences. She tried to say something, maybe to me, maybe to herself, but her mouth couldn't form the right words anymore. You should go, I told her, calm as glass. I have nothing else to say to you right now. She looked at the door behind me, the one that separated her from the children. Her eyes darted around like maybe she could squeeze out a performance, summon the old charm, beg her way back into the narrative. But no, not this time. She'd already been erased from the rewrite. This version of the story didn't need her anymore. She left in silence. By the next morning, the real collapse began. Her lover's wife didn't go quietly. She was strategic. She called their HR department. Then she filed for a legal separation. Then she took screenshots, messages she found, emails, voice notes. She sent them to me. She didn't ask for revenge. She offered it like an olive branch. I don't want to burn down your life, she said, but I will scorch his. I sent her one sentence in return. Let's make sure the ashes fall exactly where they're supposed to. And then, slowly, everything around my wife began to decay. First came the call from her boss. She was placed on administrative leave while they conducted an ethics review, a sanitized term for your private life just set the office on fire. The man she had risked it all for? He stopped answering her calls, blocked her, removed her from every shared platform. She went from his secret escape to his biggest liability overnight. She tried texting me, like we were still partners. Can we talk? Just you and me. This is getting out of hand. Please don't do this to the kids. And there it was again, this to the kids. As if I was the one who dragged another man into their orbit. As if I kissed a stranger while their daughter watched through the window. I ignored every message. Until she showed up at the school. It was Thursday. I had just picked up Eli and Mia. We were walking to the car when she appeared at the corner of the lot. Wearing a hoodie and sunglasses like shame could be hidden behind cotton and plastic. Mia, she called out. Mia froze, clutched my hand tighter. Eli stepped in front of his sister. I walked them straight to the car, buckled them in, then turned and walked back to her. You're not allowed to pick them up during the week, I said. You read the court order. She pushed the glasses up. Her eyes were bloodshot. They're still my kids. Kids need stability. You gave them chaos. Now you get scheduled weekends. If you show the court you're not dangerous. I'm not dangerous, she hissed. I looked over her shoulder. You were, the moment you let him into their world. The moment you lied so well you started to believe it. She laughed bitterly. You think you're a saint in this? No, I said. But I never had to lie to protect my mistakes. That's when she cracked. I was lonely, she shouted too loud, drawing eyes from the playground. You were selfish, I answered quieter. And now selfish has a price. She stood there trembling, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't look angry or manipulative or smug. She looked empty. Like the ground she stood on was no longer solid. Like she'd finally realized she wasn't just losing, she had already lost. And just before I turned to go, I said something I'd been holding in, they still love you. But they don't trust you. That's the scar you gave them. And it won't heal just because you cry on cue. Then I walked away. Behind me, I didn't hear footsteps. I heard nothing at all. By the weekend, the silence from her side wasn't peaceful. It was strategic. That's the thing with people like her. They don't accept defeat. They pause, waiting for the right moment to twist the blade again. And I knew she wasn't done. Not yet. There was still one more mask she hadn't worn yet. The victim. She showed up at my lawyer's office Monday morning, unannounced, claiming she was being emotionally manipulated and cut off from her family. She cried in the lobby. My lawyer called me immediately. She's not here to talk, he said. She's here to perform. I told him not to let her in the room with me. He didn't. Instead, she left behind a letter, handwritten, a full 3 pages of faux vulnerability, half apologies, Passive-aggressive lines like, "I never meant to hurt anyone, but I felt like I was drowning in a life that didn't feel like mine anymore." And then the closing line, the dagger hidden in soft paper. "Maybe if you'd noticed me fading, none of this would have happened." There it was again, the shifting blame. The soft poisoning of truth. She wasn't sorry. She was rewriting the script to turn her affair into a response, not a decision. That letter wasn't for healing, it was for court, for image, for anyone who might still believe her. But this time I was ready. Because over the last few weeks, I'd gathered more than documents. I'd gathered testimonies. Mia's drawing was only part of the truth. There were neighbors who'd seen Brian's car parked 3 blocks down on late nights. There was the school counselor who told me Eli had started drawing 2 homes in his art projects weeks before I found out the truth. And David, who overheard her once on speakerphone whispering, "I just need more time to handle it my way." Her way was over. So I made my move. That Friday, I scheduled a mediation session. Not court, not battle. Just a quiet, professional setting where truth sits between 2 people and cuts through performance like a scalpel. She came dressed to play the part. Soft sweater, loose hair, tired eyes. Like grief had settled in her skin. She sat across from me and gave that long sigh, the one she used to give when pretending she was too overwhelmed to explain herself. "I'm here because I want to fix this," she said. I didn't speak. "I miss the kids," she added, looking down. "I want to do what's best for them." Still, I said nothing. Then the mediator handed her the packet. A full chronology of everything. GPS logs, photos, the statements, Mia's drawing, even Brian's wife's notarized affidavit. She went still. Not defensive, not tearful, just still. Because in that moment, she saw it. Her narrative didn't matter anymore. The truth had teeth, and they were already sinking in. The mediator asked if she wanted to speak. She shook her head. And then, for the first time since it all started, she said something real. Not to me, to herself. I didn't think he'd fight back, and that's what she never understood. I wasn't fighting out of pride. I wasn't seeking revenge just for the drama. I stood up because someone had to draw the line. Not just for me. For Eli. For Mia. For every moment she thought she could replace honesty with convenience. And as she sat there, silent and pale, signing the first of the custody agreements, I realized she was no longer the center of the storm. She was just wreckage floating in its wake. By the time the ink dried on her signature, the damage had already calcified into something permanent. No more panic texts. No more flurries of denial. No more desperation dressed up as apologies. Just silence. And I welcomed it. The kids adjusted faster than I expected. I thought Eli might act out rebel, pull away from me, but he didn't. He became more protective of Mia. Started double-checking her backpack before school, walking her to class, even though he didn't have to. Mia, quiet as always, started drawing again. But not the chaotic, broken shapes from before. Now it was houses, trees, a lake, always a little sun in the corner. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was movement toward it. The weekend came. Her weekend. She was supposed to pick them up at 10 a.m. She didn't show. By noon, Mia asked if she forgot. "She's just late," I said, though I didn't believe it. At 3:30, a text finally came through. Something came up. "Can I reschedule?" I didn't answer. By 6 p.m., she tried again. "Tell the kids I'm sorry. I'll make it up to them." That's when it hit me. She wasn't even pretending anymore. Not to me, not to them. She'd already folded herself into the role of the absent mother. The tragic woman who lost everything, instead of the one who destroyed it. I didn't respond. I sat with Eli and Mia, made popcorn, and we watched an old space adventure movie. They laughed, really laughed, for the first time in weeks. And then something strange happened. At 9:42 p.m., I got an email. Subject line, "Hope you're happy." It was from Brian, the man himself. I opened it slowly, not knowing what I'd find, but it was a short message. "She told me you ruined her life, that you turned the kids against her. She said you were unstable, obsessive, controlling. She played the victim so hard. I almost believed her. Until your brother sent me the files. You didn't have to destroy everything. But I get it. I really do. She used both of us. I've cut her off for good. I'm not proud of what I did. I hope your kids grow up safe. You seem like a good father. Brian. I stared at it for a long time. It didn't make me feel better. It didn't give me closure. It just confirmed something I already knew. She was never loyal to anyone. Not me, not him, not even herself. She was loyal only to her illusion. And the moment it cracked, she needed someone else to blame. She burned every bridge and stood in the ashes wondering why no one came back for her. The next morning, I printed the email and filed it with the others. Just in case. Because this wasn't over. No, this was the eye of the storm. The calm before the final strike. And if she thought being ignored was the worst of it, she hadn't seen the last move yet. She thought silence meant I was done. But I was just about to speak. Publicly.it happened on a Tuesday. Not a dramatic day. Not an anniversary or a courtroom scene. Just a normal weekday that she would have never expected to carry weight. That's what made it perfect. That morning I submitted everything. Not to the court. Not to her. To the board of trustees at the private school where her company was a sponsor. To the professional ethics committee at her workplace's parent company. And to the local parenting podcast she had once bragged about being interviewed on, where she claimed to be a passionate advocate for work-life balance and maternal leadership. I sent it all compiled, organized, without exaggeration or spite. Just raw truth. A curated timeline of deception, abandonment, and self-destruction. Screenshots. Affidavits. The photo Mia drew. The email from Brian. The voice message she left on David's phone where she screamed, "You'll regret crossing me. You don't get to take everything." When she realized I had full custody now, within 48 hours, the ripple became a wave. She was quietly removed from the upcoming leadership conference she was scheduled to speak at. Her name vanished from the company's social initiatives page. Her image, once curated like a brand, now sat hollow in the vacuum of consequences she had never calculated. Then came the knock at her door. Not police, not drama. Just a manila envelope from a civil mediator, letting her know she was being sued by the spouse of the man she destroyed. Emotional distress. Infliction of reputational damage. Custody loss testimony included. Her carefully stacked cards were falling in slow motion now. One by one, each echo louder than the last. I never gloated, never posted it, never shouted. But the people she once manipulated, the ones she lied to, guilt, charmed, and danced around, they started talking, one by one. Whispers became stories. Stories became patterns. Patterns became undeniable. She called me one last time. I let it ring. Then she texted, "You turned everyone against me." I read it, deleted it, because the truth is, I didn't turn anyone. They saw. And in that silence, when her voice no longer held power and her tricks ran dry, she finally felt it. The weight of everything she built on lies, crushing down without a sound. I stood at the park that evening, watching Eli push Mia on the swing, their laughter carried by the wind. There was no bitterness, no celebration, just quiet clarity. I stood up, not alone, with my children, and together we crafted a plan that didn't rely on rage, but on truth. A plan she never saw coming. The kind of revenge that doesn't explode, it erases. Now her image is gone. Her grip is broken. Her name only echoes in the places she can't control anymore. And the final question she never asked herself, will she see it coming? No, because it's already done.